All right, everybody, we are actually going to get started. So welcome to the beginning of Module 2, Basic Biology. Now, one of the things we like to emphasize in this course more than anything is the fact that a lot of the foundational science, basic biology, basic physics, etc., give you more than enough information needed to really analyze the vast majority of studies and contribute to the vast majority of topics that are hot or trending or really just fundamental importance in fitness, in nutrition, in exercise science. There's a little bit of a thought, I think, which kind of grows and grows out of, I think, a lot of the greater culture of science, or scientism, as I like to call it, that sort of dictates that primary research, primary studies need to be what everybody is focusing on. But the majority of concepts that are still clearly poorly understood, again, not by anybody necessarily in this class or listening, but just in the field, can be very, very easily understood, dissected, and analyzed through a focused understanding of biology. And we're not even talking high-level biology. We're talking about the stuff that most of us completely forget from high school. Frankly, myself included, when I went back into the industry. And a lot of these foundations, a lot of the issue comes from not quite knowing what it was in the past that we needed to focus on. For example, the first segment we're going to be doing, as we'll see, will be on the cell. Now, basic cell biology, the parts that you need to understand multiple topics in exercise science, are fairly simple, but they are a handful of topics out of literally hundreds or thousands that you may have gone over in classes over the years. So our objective in this biology segment is to hone in on those segments, hone in on those topics that we think are critically important in exercise science. So first of all, just to confirm, everybody is able to see the screen here and can see the PowerPoint. And somebody just let me know in the questions. No bystander effect here, guys. Let me know. Anybody? Can we see? I'm going to assume yes, since everybody is being very quiet. All right. I'm putting you guys away. All right. Core biology. Oh, there we go. Okay. Thank you very much. All right. Objective. I'm going to read off the slides. I always used to get yelled at for reading off the slides, but I'm reading off the slides because I never liked any of my professors anyway. Item 1, to build and reinforce an understanding of human biology from cellular to systemic. And that's also going to be the way this entire segment is going to run. We're going to start with the fundamentals. We're going to talk about the fundamental building blocks that actually go into understanding the whole organism. And we're going to build it from the ground up. Now, I say develop and reinforce foundational knowledge of the body's signaling and energy systems. Now, this course is predicated on the understanding that you've probably had some biology along the lines. Some of you may have advanced training in biology. Some of you may have university level educations, or even be researchers or have advanced degrees in biology or the biological sciences. For those of you at that level, this will undoubtedly be a review, but it is still good to go over and reinforce some early concepts. And we are going to take these early concepts and get quite complex with them. Again, we're going to take basic cell signaling pathways that were probably discussed back when you were 16 years old in high school, and talk about how those are critical to understanding some of the topics that are still considered quote unquote cutting edge in exercise science. Okay, I'm not going to read out the slide. The one really important thing I do want to mention, though, is item 6. As we all know, the mitochondria are the powerhouses of the cell, because mitochondria is plural. So when anyone says the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, you can correct them because they're wrong in their utilization of the term. I really needed to include that, and I'm sorry that this had to become my platform. But anyhow, all right, this is going to be how it's divided. We are going to start with cellular structure and function for the first couple lists. Now, there will be a syllabus with recommended reading on each one, and I really do highly recommend you stay up with the reading, because the book that we have, the OpenStax books, which you can find on the Google Drive, is very, very good at how it organizes this. And it also additionally has a couple segments that you can use the little QR thing on your phone to find some supplemental videos and information on. So we're going to run through that. We're going to start again, cellular structure and function. Energy systems, we will be doing discussion segments in each one of these and probably analyzing papers on each one. So again, when we do the paper analysis, please remember that the paper analysis is also going to be a lecture itself. So when you get a paper, and there will be probably a survey released with each one that's going to have questions and questions to help lead the discussion, please do make an effort to address the questions in it. I realize homework isn't always going to be acceptable, and many of you are not necessarily watching all of this real time, but when you can, try to run through those and really think about and let me know where your mind is at for a lot of these questions, and it really does help us kind of construct the final lecture for you. Musculoskeletal system, again, you can read all of these. Now, the synthesis segments are going to be actually rather involved. Now that we have biomechanics under our belt, when we talk about a biological analysis of movement, we can start to pull together all the various energy systems and cell signaling pathways associated with muscle contraction, associated with aerobic exercise. We can break down something like a run and look at not only the specific stressors involved, but also the leverages involved, how energy is produced, what energy systems are utilized, and then how the body, as we see in segment 8, how the body responds to these stresses and how it adapts and why it adapts. And all of this comes down to our objective at the end of this, this is probably going to be 7 or 8 weeks, which is to have you able to break down every component of exercise and look at its impact on the body from a biological level. Cellular structure, this is what we're going to be leading with now. This is just an introduction lecture. The cellular structure segment is going to start formally on Monday once you've had a chance to do the reading. And looking at this, we are going to start with membranes and transport, organelles, nucleus, and DNA, which is going to be critically important because when we're going through this, what I really want to drive home with the cell is how various receptors work. How receptors work, where receptors are located, how they function. And this is going to hopefully shed a lot of light for those of you who aren't intimately familiar with all receptor function. How these various systems work, how testosterone works, how cortisol works, what these compounds are fundamentally doing. Because again, what we would like to do is be able to take these concepts and have you look at a primary source paper on a subject ranging from testosterone replacement therapy to, the impact of hypogonadism on exercise to anything else. We can talk about ketogenic diets and what those are doing, and have you able to correctly hypothesize, correctly postulate the impact of these things on a cellular level without having to read the papers. Well, also, in the replication and cell destruction, I know there are a couple of topics going around, apoptosis, autophagy, a couple of other things that have been discussed, and it would be interesting to examine what these things really mean, how often they occur naturally, and we'll probably look at a few papers where these phenomena are being discussed and be able to analyze really what the speakers are saying. Now, this is a slide I really want to focus on. The topics on this page, without understanding cell membranes, transports, and receptors, you cannot fully understand any one of these processes listed here. Let's give you a second to look at that. Now, this is not an exaggeration. Every one of these things, ranging from, we talk about digestion, we talk about cellular breakdown, we talk about transport, breaking down nutrients and transporting them across the intestinal wall, across the brush border, all of those things, food absorption and processing. You cannot understand any of these things, including things like hydration, cannot be understood without understanding the types of transporters, active versus passive, diffusion, osmolarity, or anything like that. Energy systems, aerobic versus anaerobic, lactate production, utilization, without understanding fundamentally how cell membranes utilize ATP, how the electron transport chain actually works, what fermentation is, how lactate is processed and utilized by cells. you cannot actually understand the difference between low intensity exercise and high intensity exercise and lifting and any of those topics. Adaptation to training, muscle repair, growth, and recovery. If you're talking about what happens to a muscle after it's worked, you're talking about what happens on a cellular level. You talk about inflammation after training. You talk about the growth cascade, muscle hypertrophy, amino acid utilization, breakdown of existing cellular structure. Speaking about autophagy and apoptosis and things like that. All of those things require an understanding of cell membranes and transport to correctly process. Hormones of any sort. I mean, granted, I mentioned hormones in the next one, but any sort of anabolic, catabolic hormone, the action of things like epinephrine, norepinephrine, anything along those lines, understanding how they work in the body. Again, you need to understand cell membranes and transport proteins. Hunger, weight gain, weight loss, insulin, all of those things. Again, this loops back a little bit to hormones, leptin, ghrelin, insulin, all of that, but also understanding how certain types of hormone release and catecholamines, et cetera, cholecystokinin, things like that in the digestive system cause these feedback loops that change, that have impacts, fundamental, profound impacts on things like gastric motility, stomach emptying, satiation, all of that. And finally, cellular respiration, most simple thing there is. How do our cells get oxygen? How does hemoglobin release oxygen into the cells? What are the diffusion properties of cell membranes? All of these things, again. So just something to keep in mind, that if you've forgotten a little bit on this, this is why you should go back and review it. So, just to give you a brief overview, since there's going to be some recommended reading, this is the cell membrane. Now, we're not going to go through all the details. Some folks remember the phospholipid bilayer and may remember from science class when you looked at oil bubbles and realized that a cell membrane is basically just an oil bubble that's held together. Now, what I really want you to focus on, though, is a couple of things here. First of all, you look at something like glycoproteins and look at all these sensors and receptors on cell surfaces. This is a topic that's going to come up again and again and again. We talk about receptors on the surfaces of cells. You can see that there are proteins with carbohydrates attached, lipids with carbohydrates attached, all these membrane proteins, all of these different sensors and receptors that just litter the top of each cell. Now, some of these things, you look at some of these membrane proteins, some are peripheral, some are channel proteins, which are responsible for bringing things in and out of the cell. But the other important thing to realize, and we're going to talk about this at great length, is that a lot of the compounds within a cell membrane are not only species unique, but in fact can be individual unique. Glycoproteins, glycoprotein patterns, these are largely determined by environmental exposure. You look at anything from, say, antibodies or recognition of cells. Glycoproteins can be very unique to a host organism. Incorrect glycoproteins or unknown glycoproteins can target a cell for destruction. So when you look at why, say, organs are rejected, it's because the glycoproteins on the surface of those cells are not recognized by the body and they're attacked. So many things that go into this. Again, looking at channel proteins, looking at membrane proteins. Keep in mind, this is how we're going to start discussing transport through cells, receptors, and different kind of cell signaling. All right, so this is going to be the first subjects, again, that we're going to cover starting on Monday. And on the recommended reading, I really do want you guys to kind of focus on these topics. Now, independent review for first weekly discussion. What we really want to emphasize, what we really want you to look at, is how cell structures, how cell walls, cell membranes, etc., vary between different species and different organisms. Now, why is this critical to understand? Well, when we look at things like antibiotic action, one of the things, hot topics in fitness and nutrition and supplementation is the concept of environmental toxins. People talk about potential risks of antibiotics to the body. People talk about the effects of certain things like glyphosate on humans. And it is important to understand that different organisms and different classes of organisms have very different structures and can even have completely different uh, compounds inside their cell membranes. Now, this is important to understand because, again, we're not just trainers, we're not just athletes, we're not just coaches. Many times we are asked to analyze or discuss certain components related to just kind of lifestyle and general health and wellness. And when people discuss things like, again, environmental toxins, they discuss, oh, well, what is the impact of organic food versus GMO food, and things again like Roundup. What are those things potentially doing to the human body? It's important to understand that many of these compounds, ranging from, again, antibiotics, which often target structures unique to bacteria, and environmental pesticides, which often target certain structures that are unique to certain kind of plants, etc., may or may not affect human cells. But of course, that it is also important when you do your independent review to look up some of the types of bacteria and other organisms found within the human gut, because that's also going to be a hot topic moving forward, and something we want to discuss in a later discussion section is what the human gut biome looks like. And that's going to be something when we get into the digestion section that's going to be a major topic of discussion, is just how this kind of growing science of the gut microbiome is trying to answer a lot of questions that we formerly really didn't have any good solution to. So it's not as simple as simply saying human cells are different from plant cells or bacteria cells, therefore something that hurts bacteria isn't going to hurt us. It's worth obviously looking at the other structures and other organisms, these mutualistic or commensalistic organisms that live with us and in us. So, the first reading for the first lecture. Now, everybody should have access to the OpenStax Anatomy and Physiology book that's on the drive. It's in the base drive, it's in the textbooks section. If you do not have that, please shoot me a note and let me know. And read pages 97 through 107. They are extremely quick reads. It probably takes about a minute and a half to get through each page. But these are the terms I really want you to focus on. Now, the first term there, now all of these have to do with receptor action. And that's where the first section is going to be on. So look at these focus terms. If you feel that the book doesn't describe them accurately, do a Google search. Wow, I need more coffee. Do a Google search, go down the whole Wikipedia rabbit hole, and take a look at these things, and we'll discuss them in greater detail. We will also be going through the syllabus. So, and now, the one thing I really want to emphasize here as well is that when we discuss biology, we are not just discussing it. We are not going to go through the entire, soup to nuts, start to finish, start of the cell, and here is the structure of glucose and all of that. Throughout this course, especially for this first live run, if there are topics where you think, as we're going through them, and this applies to the biomechanics section we discussed as well, if there are topics you look at and say, oh, I really would have liked to see a little more focus on this, or here is something that we haven't discussed in a long time, please do let us know. One of our biggest emphases this time around is really making sure that this all remains a classroom-style discussion when needed. So again, be very forward with the questions. If you can't access the reading materials, please let us know, and really let us help you fill in these gaps, because that's the goal here. The goal with the biomechanics, with biology, with all these fundamentals is for you, as you go through it, to start to say, okay, I can look at this, I understand this now well enough to begin to apply this to more complex topics. All right, so the syllabus will be going out. Today was relatively brief. And again, all I can say is please focus on the readings. And Monday, we will dig into all the details on cell membranes, transporters, and hopefully, if anybody wants to also kind of follow along for the discussion section, please let me know if Friday or the weekend is better for the discussion sections. because that's going to be kind of fixed from now on. And we are noticing that a lot of folks don't seem to be able to make the weekends, but we really want to make the discussion and analysis sections something that everybody can get to, because those are honestly going to be the most fun. So enjoy the reading. Let me know if you have any issues accessing it. And I am looking forward to chatting with you and basically running through pretty much all the biology I've ever known in my entire life over the next 6 to 7 weeks. So if there are any questions, please let me know within the next minute or two. Otherwise, I would say if you can, take the rest of these 20, 25 minutes, pull that OpenStax book and get started on the reading. Thank you all very much.